Now, the system at the time, I'm very familiar with the system at the time because I was one of the TPCs at the time, the Talent Performance Coordinator in Lancashire. And in part of a journey, I went back into coaching at Bolton. And so I did come across Emma when I took Marnie Banks to a national tournament. So I was familiar with who Emma was very much. So we're looking at the system that was in place then. So you had the talent ID system, you had the competition structure, you had the new balls, which was red, orange and green. How did you find that structure for working with Emma? Did it work for her?
I think it did. I mean, there's a lot of coaches, I think, that are anti-establishment. They look to blame, you know, the LTA or point the finger or criticize. I don't do that. I think we're very, very fortunate in this country to have a governing body of the caliber of the LTA. I think, if anything, they're guilty of trying to be too good, and they make it too good. I know in Spain, I remember once I went to a Kent road show, as it was called there, where all the clubs in Kent got together, and Keith Pullen was there. And he was talking about this type of thing, and everyone was moaning and, you know, asking him some real awkward questions. And there was this chap from Spain that had just started working at one of the local clubs at the time, and he kind of got up and just said, you know, I just want to say everything that you're presenting, everything that you're talking about is absolutely phenomenal. He's like, you know, I'm from Spain. We have nothing like this. The governing body, they don't even look at the kids until they're like 16 years old. They have no idea who the best 9-10-year-old is. Like Clute, that they're not interested. They don't. That's not their philosophy, and you're just out there on your own as a coach doing what you think is the right thing. There's no education. You know, you don't know how lucky you are, and I'll never forget that. And I thought that anyway. You know, I never look at the LTA as the answer. I think that we as coaches, we're the ones doing 90% of the work, and the LTA are probably making up the extra 10%. They're a support mechanism in my eyes. You know, the buck stops with us. So the system at the time, you know, I embraced. Yes, it changed again, like everybody, you know, criticizes it for doing. But things do change. You know, that's my attitude to it. Things do change. If things are changed because people think it can be better, well, why not? And I mean, the system for Emma, you could argue, worked because she was one of the better ones. So always got invited to the talent ID days, you know, always went on the trips, always got into the tournaments. You could say that. And I totally get why people might say that. But the reason why it was good was because you had these norms, you had these measures, which I like as a coach. You know, I'm from the school of thought of, well, there must be something to aim for, you know, so who can hit the most forehands cross court in a minute? If it's Emma Raducanu and she's doing 20, well, let's try and do 21, you know, and I like that. I think that's motivational for coaches, for players. I think it sets standards. So all of that stuff they used to do when they went to those days, like the rally balls in a minute and cross court and serves wide, serves tee, you know, all those measures, I just thought were pretty good, if I'm going to be honest with you. I think it gave us something to focus on. We knew when she went to those days what she was going to be doing, so it encouraged us to work on them a little bit. We didn't work on them in such a closed way. I remember she went to one workshop, one talent ID day, and Keith Pullen actually pulled up her star drill result or something, and he's, you know, it's the best in the country. It's the quickest we've ever seen. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. You know, she's always been a good mover. And he was like, do you practice that with her like every session? And I was just like, no, I don't actually. You know, we just practice it probably once or twice when we know she's going to go and do one of these days. Same with they had the one, didn't they, where they had to hit wide, they had to run side to side and keep hitting forehands and backhands.
Yes.
You know, we would have practiced those things, but more in a games-based situation. You know, I'd have fed her a wide ball and made her play the point out with someone or something like that. We didn't just do the subscribed approach of practicing the tests. So I think that's a good example of me knowing, okay, there are these tests. She's got to be good at them, but we're not just going to put all our eggs in that one basket and just practice the tests. What does the test mean? Why is the test there? And put it back into the game, and that's the type of thing we would do, and I think it was nice for her to go to those days with the other girls, to see the other players around her. I was a fan of those talent ID days. Maybe they shouldn't have been called talent ID days because you're labeling players and all of that type of thing. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not saying you definitely shouldn't.
This concept and what was going to be rolled out. And the person that was behind it all was Steve Martins.
Yes.
And I remember going up to him and I said, with this, really, you're not testing for talent, you're testing which children have been with coaches that have got the job done. And his answer was yes. Yeah. It focused you. It focused me as a coach when I went back to coaching. It focused a lot of coaches. Do you think there's the reason to focus there now? Has it changed?
I think now you could say it's a little bit too fluffy now. It's they've and this is where it goes in cycles. That was very, very analytical very early on, and it then they had the mini tennis ratings, didn't they? They had Red 1 stars and all of that stuff, and that was kind of the first thing to go was the mini tennis ratings, which I think it's down to the coaches. I think if there's parents out there that are obsessing over the mini tennis ratings, the coach, there's something wrong with the coaching. There's a flaw in the center that they're at, if that's all they're worried about. Did some of the players that I coached, parents, focus too much on those things? Well, of course they did. You're always going to get the people that do that. But I think it was a shame when they took all of that stuff away, and then they stopped with the talent ID days, and they then had fun days, I think they called them, which I don't know. I think you're just trying too hard to make it too user friendly. Really, that's my opinion. If we're talking about trying to identify the best players, there has to be a level, doesn't there? And I don't know. I just think it was clearer then as to what the level was. Personally, that's what I thought.
And it's not as if there isn't pressure in our sport.
Exactly.
There is pressure in our sport. If it might not be the right place for some players.
Exactly. And I had players that went to those talent ID days and those regional camps that weren't as good as Emma and were, turned away or dropped, for the next one or whatever. And, so I did see it from the other side of the fence. It wasn't as if I just had this great player that was setting the standards and everything was rosy. I had plenty of players that would be told, you're not quite strong enough, or you've been invited to this regional day, but unfortunately you're not going to go to the next one. And you, as you say, it gave me something to focus on. And when I look back at those players that didn't get into those things or got in and then were dropped off, they were not up to the standard. They weren't.
I remember having a lot of conversations, and the conversations I was having was, it's a moment in time. It means something at this moment, but it doesn't mean everything.
Yes.
And I had a lot of those conversations. Do you think if those conversations had happened more, maybe that could have gone better?
Yes, but I think, all the things we're talking about, they're happening now anyway, but in a different form. Now they've brought in you can play up an age group. How many of the players are sticking to their own age group? They're all just playing up because they think that that's better. And, if they're 10, they're trying to get an 11 and under ranking. And if they're 11, they're playing 14 and under tournaments because you can get more points. And, all of those things happen anyway, as far as I'm concerned. And they always will, unless you take away the whole of the ranking and rating system. And, when you turn up to a tennis tournament, everybody wins a medal and there is no winner, runner up, third place, that you're always going to have people that want to win the medal, want to come first, you know, and the talent ID system was just another part of that jigsaw for me. People wanted to go, they wanted to get invited back, they wanted to get the funding, the matrix funding or whatever it was, you know, and as you said, it is a competitive sport. That's going to kick in at some point. So I think it was a shame that it went. I thought there were some really good things in there for the players, the parents and the coaches that was motivational, that drove you in the right direction. And I do think that some of that stuff now has been lost a little bit. And I would like to see some of that stuff reintroduced. I'm heavily involved in county tennis in Kent. And, you know, for a year and a half before the pandemic, I was the 11 and under lead coach for all age groups. And it was definitely something that I was talking to our Kent team about reinstating at 8 and under, because a lot of the kids were turning up and the levels were so diverse. And I said, there should be something in here that these kids have to be able to do to get into a county training session. It can't just be that they're in it because they like tennis and they're keen, because that's what the clubs are for. So it'll be interesting to see whether that stuff gets put back in. I think the 8 and under ratings, I think, you know, that was, I think, a little bit over the top. But orange and green, I never really had a problem with it if it was managed in the right way. And I think that's the key here. It's whatever system you have, it has to be managed by the coaches in the correct way. And I think sometimes maybe that doesn't happen because the parents are the ones managing the player and leading the program. And that's hard.